All right, I think we'll get started. So thank you everyone for joining us today. This is going to be a great conversation. For those of you who I don't know, my name is Elise Bernardoni and I'm with the Canopy team. I'm joined today by James Danoff-Burg, who's the Director of Conservation for the Living Desert Zoo and Gardens in Palm Desert, California, where it's actually raining today, which is very rare. I'm also joined by Ervin, who's the Associate Director of Education for Spectrum Discovery Center of the University of Montana in Missoula, Montana, and she's also pursuing her PhD right at the moment. We're joined with Brianne Studer, who is the Director of Programs for Friends of the National Arboretum here in Washington, DC, where I'm also joining you from. And finally, we've got Bruce Young, who's our Affiliate Relations Specialist for the North American Association of Environmental Educators, which you may know as NAAEE or NAAEE, and he's joining us from Charlottesville, Virginia today. So before I let our panelists share a little bit about themselves, I just want to share a few words about why we're doing this webinar series. So at Canopy, we've recently been asking the question, are public-facing organizations whose missions involve conservation doing enough to save the planet? And we truly don't believe that we are. We know that many organizations are operating under the belief that affecting incremental change is the path forward. But in reality, we need to be implementing systems-wide change approaches in order to be effective. Our roles as organizations that care about the environment and conservation are powerful, and it's our obligation to lead these movements as respected and trusted members of our community. So over the next few months, we're using our webinars to explore how mission-driven organizations can leverage common strengths in community engagement, conservation, leadership, and economic development to be change agents for a better planet. So today, our topic is, what is our role in saving the planet through community? And we'd like this to be an active and engaging dialogue, so feel free to put all of your questions and comments into the chat. We'll ask those questions as they come in, and we'll save some time at the end for questions as well. So with that little spiel, I'd like each of our panelists to introduce themselves and give us a bit about who they are and the work that they do. So I'm just going to go in alphabetical order by last name. And so James, you're up first.
All right. Thank you, Elise. Great introduction too. Hi, everyone. Nice to see so many friends and new friends here in the discussion. I'm Dr. James Danoff-Burg, as Elise was saying, Director of Conservation at the Living Desert Zoo and Gardens. I've been involved in conservation for, let's say, a long time, many decades. And I started off as a biologist, very much focused on insects and the impacts of human activities on those insects, and quickly realized that I was more or less counting the deck chairs on the Titanic. So I wanted to get out and try to repair the Titanic, and that involves addressing the root causes of conservation declines, which, as Elise was saying, is really human-based. So I've retrained myself over the last 15 years as a social scientist, community-based conservationist more, really. And that's what we're here to talk about. Really.
Thanks, James. I'll go to you next.
Thanks. Hello, everyone. My name is Ervin. As Elise said, I'm the Associate Director of Education at the University of Montana Spectrum Discovery Area. So our approach to conservation and community engagement is more education focused. We are a hands-on science museum that is free to the public. We're located on the second floor of the Missoula Public Library, which we're very proud to share that the American Library Association voted as the #1 library in the world last year. So the next time you're in Missoula, come hang out with us. And then the last thing I'll share is an introduction is we do a lot of collaborative programming and collaborative work with a ton of community-based organizations and our tribal affiliates up on the Flathead Reservation as well.
Thanks, Caitlin. Brianne, I'll go to you next.
Hello, everybody. My name is Brianne Studer. I am the Director of Programs for Friends of the National Arboretum, which is the primary nonprofit partner for the U.S. National Arboretum here in DC. I have been doing environmental education for over 15 years now, often at small nonprofits, some at museums in Boston, where I was at for the majority of my time before I moved down to DC. And I will just highlight, the Friends of the National Arboretum fills many public programs roles at the U.S. National Arboretum. But what's uniquely special is that our primary program is the Washington Youth Garden, which has been a community-based youth garden for 50 years now, and the work that we've done over that time has evolved and shifted and continues to change to both meet the needs of the communities that we're working with and engaging with, but also to expand the scope and connection of the U.S. National Arboretum across the district.
Thanks, Brianne. And finally, Bruce.
Hi, everyone. Bruce Young here. As mentioned, I'm the Affiliate Relations Specialist with NAAA. I've done all kinds of stuff. So I have spent some time in zoos and aquariums as public programs presenter at the Greensboro Science Center in Greensboro, North Carolina, and then got my teaching license and taught K-1 for a little while, 5th grade for a little while, before transitioning into nonprofit administration work with NAAA. So I coordinate our network of 54 state, regional, and provincial EE associations. And if you're not familiar with NAAA, we are the backbone organization and convener for environmental education, looking at advocacy, equity, and inclusion. And we have several nested programs. We're a network of networks between our affiliate network, our Global Environmental Education Partnership, or GEEP, and then our Natural Start Alliance, as well as several award programs such as the EE 30 Under 30 and Sea Change Fellows. So there's lots of different avenues for engagement with us. So.
Great, thanks, Bruce. So as y'all can see, we've really tried to bring together a diverse group of folks who are working in a variety of different community settings. If you know Canopy and our former life as zoo advisors, we oftentimes worked specifically with zoos and aquariums, and it's our goal to be convening folks who come from all different mission-driven organizations so that we can better leverage our power together. So I will continue to remind folks that if you have questions or comments for our panelists, feel free to just drop them in the chat. We do want this to be active and engaged. Feel free to put on your camera and just ask a question as we go along. But since it's a little quiet in the chat so far, my first question is to our panelists. And I'll actually start, Caitlin, with you. My first question to everybody, though, is what does saving the planet mean to you?
Such a big question to ask. I think it could mean a lot of different things. I think saving the planet in terms of conservation means a lot of different approaches and being extremely adaptable, leveraging expertise with professionals and listening to those professionals, but also listening to the communities that are directly being impacted and the varieties of ways they might be impacted. So some of the ways that we do that at Spectrum, like I said, we're a science museum. We're really, really invested in education and breaking down barriers to hands-on education, particularly. So we do a lot of work to expand our reach across the state. Montana is very rural, so we try and be as mobile as we can. And then we also have community advisory groups to make sure that wherever we're going, we want to make sure that we're addressing the needs of those communities and listening to them.
Great, thank you. James, what does saving the planet mean to you?
That's a big question. I love Caitlin's answer. You got me thinking about, saving the planet. We can think of it as the end product, right? We want to get to whatever that end is, saving species, saving communities of humans that are reliant on the planet, saving functioning ecosystems, saving processes that are provided by ecosystems. But I think equally as important as the outcome is the process, which Caitlin, I think, was talking a lot about, that we're doing this in a just and equitable fashion, that to make certain that the people who are living in and dependent on those ecosystems are able to get the living out of the world, out of the planet that they would want. So I don't really know, I think, is my answer. When you first said it, I thought, whoo, I'm glad you asked Caitlin first, because I don't really know. It's some interaction of the process and the product and the end product, and I don't know what the answer is for me.
And that's perfectly fine. I love the concept of the interaction of the process and the product. I think saving the planet is not a destination, right? It's an ongoing, long-term sort of ethos and thought, and how are we going to do this together? So with that in mind, Bruce, why don't you share with us a little bit about what you think saving the planet means?
Sure. Well, first of all, I think saving the planet has to come from an intersectional approach. We can't just be focusing on one topic or the other, but we have to really be thinking about, systems at play, all kinds of things, which the other panelists have mentioned. And, we have NAAA, we have a tagline, education we need for the world we want. And so I think one way to save the planet is really by making systemic change to make sure every student is getting environmental literacy content at every grade level, every band, and really understand their place and are armed with the tools to make the action and change that they need. I mean, we see these climate marches that are youth-led. There's so much more, I don't know, I wouldn't say availability, but even I'm 35, and even from when I was a kid, there's so much more attention by youth of today to fight for the problems and issues that, we were kind of blind to or quiet on 15, 20 years ago. So also supporting those youth and the future generations, or that seventh generation thinking. That's, I think, how we save the planet.
Yeah, thanks, Bruce. And I think that concept of intersectionality is so important as well. That's exactly what we're trying to do here at Canopy, is bring together diverse groups that all have the same heart, right? The same wanting to save the planet, and we're all approaching it from different directions and different angles. And so not only the intersectionality of the folks that we work with, but the intersectionality of the partners that we bring in together. So Brianne, I'll ask you the same question for the last time.
Saving the planet for me is about people. I think any work that we do to save the planet it is inherently based on the impact that it has on the people that live on the planet. What is the impact that these changes that are happening are going to happen on people, and how can we lessen the burden? And I think any one of us, even just the four of us up here, answer this question, save the planet, a little bit differently. And that is true across the board. If you asked anybody what do they mean by saving the planet, they would bring a different answer to that. And I just think part of this work about engaging people to make change is about saying, what makes you come alive? What are you passionate about? How do you connect to nature? And how can you think intentionally about that work? Because when we're all doing that work and finding our authentic relationships to nature, we will more intentionally work to save the planet in any number of different ways.
Yeah, that's perfect and beautiful, Brianne. And talking about the people component of this, every person on this call is working specifically with people who are working with more people. And Caitlin, you actually mentioned that that Spectrum has a wonderful history of working with the tribal nations in Montana. So I'm curious, we're talking about working together, and that we all come at this from different perspectives. And it occurs to me that our organizations, or us personally, are often outsiders of the communities with which we want to be working. And so as Spectrum, how do you and your team go about developing trust and relationships with folks who are in different communities, so that those relationships can be nurtured and thrive?
That's a great question. I think it's been really important to us to build those relationships because, as I said, Montana is very rural. There are a lot of achievement gaps that we're trying really hard to close across the state in terms of education and access to education. And one of the ways we do that is by working with, there's a lot of reservations in Montana. And we want to work with them and address the needs of their community in the way that we best can through hands-on science education. So building those relationships has taken a long time. I think it's important when we started doing that to really understand the history and context in which we're coming into those communities so that we're better informed and we're being as respectful as we can be. And then it's investing a lot of time and space, listening very well, and I think responding to what their needs are. And it's been a lot of conversations and a lot of driving across the state for 8 hours across the very flat parts of Montana that are not very interesting. But yeah, it's been a really great process. And we've often those relationships we build are through grants. So while the grants sunset, we still want to keep those relationships and keep that investment in the community. So we've built a signation advisory group, which is a lot of different community leaders on the Flathead Reservation. And we've been working with them for a number of years now. And that's been really awesome just to have that sustained relationship over time too.
Great, thank you. And James, I know that you also have an extraordinary amount of experience in working with communities that are outside of our personal typical communities. And so can you talk a little bit about how you go about developing and maintaining those trustful relationships?
Yeah, I think it's very similar to Carrie. We work with a lot of Native American tribes here in California, and a lot of our work through the Living Desert is building capacity, which we'll talk about probably a little later, among conservationists, I'll just say, rather than conservation biologists, in Eastern and Southern Africa too. And so in all those communities, which are the majority of my personal work, the things that I do rather as opposed to my team, I don't look like anyone there. You know, I'm very much an outsider. I'm very much of a person not from that community and very much from the oppressor class. So for me, I think the most important thing for me personally, but also relevant to anyone working with communities of which we are not an intrinsic part, and maybe even when we are, is humility and patience, and openness, just all the good things in life, right? The things that make a person want to talk to you. That's what we need to be able to do. You know, we need to know what it is that, as Eric just said, we need to know what the community wants, and we need to be able to know what it is that we want and be open about what we want and what we're trying to achieve there, and work together to come up with processes that ideally are mutually beneficial. Otherwise, why are people working together? You know, we have goals, communities have goals, different sections of our communities have different kinds of goals, and we need to be able to respect and to be able to accommodate and work within those. And ideally, we get the same of what we give. So for me, that humility and patience and openness are three of the most important things that whenever I go to any community, that I start with. You know, it's not a hat in the hand kind of approach, but it's not too far from that, because I don't want to do colonial conservation. You know, we've done that for a long time, and we don't need to do that anymore. I don't know that we ever needed to do it, to be honest, but it's a thing that we need to change how we do conservation, and this is an easy and I think just way to go about it.
Thank you, James. And you know, you mentioned your capacity building for conservationists, and I think the intent of that conservation capacity building actually gets at the question that Lisa is asking. So I'm going to sort of roll a few questions in together here. And you know, Lisa is asking in the chat, are we the right people to be leading this work? And are we, or can we shift power and resources to communities that historically have not had an extractive relationship with the environment? And so, James, if I may ask you to talk a little bit about the capacity building programs that you're working on, and if in fact it is sort of speaking to what Lisa is asking here and how you're shifting that community model.
All right, thank you. Yeah, and thank you, Lisa. That's a great point, and not really a question, more of a point. That, you know, it's really important that the local people are the ones who are leading whatever efforts that we're working with, because local people are the ones who are going to be there long after we leave, whether we move on from our job, whether we move out of the community, even if we're a part of those communities. We are not going to be working in that community longer than the community will be. So they need to be the ones who lead the processes. And ideally, the processes that we're working with are those that, like I said earlier, are meeting the needs of those communities. So the work that Elise was just asking me to talk a little bit about, I do these workshops, these training workshops, week-long social science training workshops that have a terribly ungainly name, which is the Building Community Conservation Success Social Science Workshop. Throw it all in there together. And my goal is to make myself unnecessary because most conservation biologists, which I was before, well, still am kind of, before coming to the light, most conservation biologists, when you get into the field and start working with people, you realize I'm doing the wrong thing. You know, I need to work with communities. I need to, me counting giraffe or zebra on the plains of the Serengeti isn't really getting at why they're decreasing, because species are decreasing, ecosystems are being compromised because of our actions as a species. And so we can change that. So with the workshops that we do, I try to build capacity and then support that capacity among community leaders and especially among the conservation organizations to enable them to collect data from and with communities so that they can build on the skills and empower the communities and be empowered themselves as part of those communities to be able to do things in whatever the right way is, whatever counts as right for that community.
That's something we've seen too is like we call it the train the trainer model. So if you train someone, I mean, they are already part of that community. They're going to already be way better received than an outsider would be. So teaching them the skills that we've developed and then having them just go with it has been a really great process for us too.
Yeah, thank you, James and Caitlin. And actually, Brianne, I'd like to bring you back into this conversation because you are also very much working with community and listening to community and affecting our local community in a really positive and wonderful way. But obviously through a somewhat different lens than conservation of animals and ecosystems. So I'd kind of like to roll two questions together. One, Shasta is asking in the, or sort of making a point in the chat that members of a community need to identify and support what they need or want to come from us. And how do we put ourselves out there so that those community members are aware of the resources and assistance we can offer? And then, so I'll let you start with that. And then I'd like to follow up on a conversation that you and I had earlier in the week and ask a few questions about that. And I think you'll sort of naturally lead into it.
Okay, great. Yeah, so one of the primary programs that we do at Friends of the National Arboretum is through our school garden support programs. It's called the Educator Coaching Program. And this is really a transition of how we've supported school gardens in the district for the last 20 years. So originally we started supporting schools to develop school gardens by having a multi-year partnership. We would help them install school gardens, and then eventually when they were ready, they could take on the school garden themselves. But the reality is, if any of you have managed a garden of any capacity before, it requires continuous love and care, and there's often initial enthusiasm, and then sometimes the school champion leaves. You know, the teacher turnover rate in the District of Columbia is 30%, and if you are talking about Title I schools, it's closer to 40%. So the odds of our school champions leaving is very, very high. And we really shifted our approach a lot to recognize that. There are already a whole bunch of school gardens in the district that were built. However, a school garden is just a piece of infrastructure unless it's used by teachers and students. And so we shifted our framework from the garden itself to really thinking about how do we encourage schools to focus on their goals and what do they want to achieve through their school garden programs. So now the Educator Coaching Program, teams of teachers and administrators and sometimes parent volunteers, different community members who are part of that school's garden team, sign up with us. We help them figure out what their goals are, and they can be very unique. For some, it's really about food access, about our school does not have a grocery store nearby. How can we bring fresh produce and nutrition education into our schools? And for others, it's about developing community support and connection in their school gardens, setting up volunteer work days, engaging more teachers in teaching in this way. And we really try to approach it from, let's talk about what you want to achieve through your goals, and then we will do whatever we have to do to support them in that. And part of it is built on that 20-year history of doing school garden works. We try to make sure that we know the resources that are available to those schools. We try to be the expert on that technical side of things so that they can be the expert on what do they want to achieve on their own community, and certainly through their students. The idea is that we work with them for a year, and then we can determine at the end of that school year, are they ready to go on and tackle it themselves? Do they need another year? And the crucial part is that this isn't the end of the cycle. We know that in 2 or 3 more years, we'll come back and be back to support them when they reach back out to us. And they can continue to send teachers to our professional development in the summer to continue to increase the team of people that's involved in this work, because the goals are more authentic, they're more holistic when there are more people invested in caring about them. And that all starts from identifying what are they all trying to achieve through the school garden, because it can be very, very different. Did that sort of answer that? Oh, you're on mute.
Thank you. I just realized that happens to us all. So yes, I think it did answer the question. And Shasta, I actually want to go back to your question in a moment. And Bruce, I'm gonna kick Shasta's question to you in a moment. But I wanted to sort of finish up on the thought that I had earlier, Brianne, about we had this really great conversation earlier in the week about our organizations all have goals, right? We are at our heart, we all want to save the planet, but our goals are not necessarily the same as our community's goals. And so, can you speak a little bit about the experiences that you've had recently with schools, and what do you do, and how do you honor both the needs and priorities of the community with which you're working and the needs and priorities of your organization to sort of bring those together? Or do you, what is your approach to making sure that those needs are met, and what's the hierarchy there?
Well, I will say many of us work within organizations for whom the mission is quite broad, and how we achieve that mission happens in a wide variety of different ways. And it's up to us to determine how we actually go about doing that. Now, on a very practical side, oftentimes one of the things that we do is we pursue grants to help us create programs that help us achieve these goals. And I think that the biggest thing that we did to help us approach this work from a more community-driven angle was to reframe how we set our goals. So our goals became less about, we're going to provide so many hours of direct education and we're going to touch this many students and this many, build this many garden beds and all of the specifics, and instead reframed it to, we're going to help schools achieve this many goals. And then it's up to us in partnership with those schools to determine what those goals are. And so they can vary. And we actually did have one long-term funder who had been funding our existing garden science program, who we were able to approach and walk through. We want to change our program. We want to change what we've been doing. We want to focus more on work that will change the system that exists at a school, as opposed to just engage individual young people, which is of course important. But the reality is that to continue to do this work, it can't just be us doing it. And of course, we'll always have to be involved because they require continuous resources, right? Teachers are constantly having additional things put on them, additional things that they have to do. So even if it is their deep heart work to continue to do this work, they need allies and support networks and additional resources, especially in our under-resourced schools. So how do we make it match? we try to be flexible in the positions that we hire, in the ways that we promote the work that's actually going to happen. And we try to really reframe everything based on that goal, so if we have multiple events that are happening at the same time for a school and we're trying to figure out how do we support that, well, the framing question comes back to, how does this serve the goal that school is trying to achieve? And we can then look at those conflicting priorities and say, well, this is directly tied. And I mean, this would be nice, but odds are it's not going to have as big an impact on that goal as this other one. And that has been the most important, to really reframe what we do based on outcomes as opposed to just outputs.
Great, thank you, Brianne. And James, I saw you emphatically nodding when I was asking this question at the beginning, and now you've got your hand raised. So you clearly have some thoughts and suggestions around this topic.
Yeah. Thank you. And I think Brianne really did a nice job of answering the question. I just want to echo some of what she was saying just briefly. That if your goals don't match those of the community that you're working in, then you are in the wrong place, and your goals are misset, because I think, as Brianne said, we all have very broad goals, right? We want to save whatever aspect of the planet we prioritize and that we're focusing on, whether it's culture or music or literature or species or whatever, what have you. And if within that broad remit you don't have goals that match with your community, you're not going to succeed. And you're doing, it's almost an injustice to the community. If you want to be maximally effective, we are public serving agencies. We need to be able to match those of the community. If we want to move the communities along in a direction that we prioritize, right, in the ways that we're talking about, because we are mission driven, so we clearly have a priority and a drive and a behavior change aspect to our work, we need to be able to do it in a way and in a setting that is comparable and compatible with the needs and goals of the community, which I think Brianne really did a nice job of saying how one could go about doing that. So the premise of the question is kind of what got me there. Thanks.
Caitlin, do you have anything that you want to add into that?
I feel like Brianne and James nailed it.
Okay,
I definitely agree.
great.
I will say, in the nature of conservation, you're not always going to have communities that believe in that, and that's where the stickiness gets into play, where it's a difference of values. And I would hope that education might serve as some kind of antidote to that ignorance. But again, if you come into a community saying, I know what will fix your community, they're gonna feel like that's not a very authentic approach. So
yeah, thank you. So, Shasta, I said that I was going to go back to your question, and Bruce, I'd like to give you the opportunity to shine a little bit of light onto the fantastic resources that NAAWE offers. So we're all excited, right? We're ready to save the world, but there may be some folks on this call who don't quite know where to start. Like, what's the first step? What resources do we need in order to start this? So, how do we put ourselves out there so that our community members are aware of who we are and the resources that we have? So I would love, Bruce, for you to talk about the amazing work that NAAWE does in community engagement work.
Of course. So I'll start with just saying, we have a little thing called the Community Engagement Guidelines for Excellence that we produce at NAAWE. This is a great guide. It covers our 5 key characteristics that we have seen in the field as high level kind of things that make good community engagement. And so these were produced with a participatory process with thousands of people giving their insights, giving their lessons learned. And so those characteristics are that it's community centered, that it's based on sound environmental education principles, that it's collaborative and inclusive, that it's oriented towards capacity building and civic engagement. And then finally, that there's a long-term investment in change, so that true community engagement isn't just a flash in the pan, but it's long-term investment in communities. And so these are available. I'll drop the link to the PDF right now for free on our website. Almost all of our resources are available for free on our website. This is like it's chock full of resources, like 60 pages of it are resources around how do you do convenings, how do you do logic mapping, how do you do stakeholder engagement, how do you know if you're not actually ready for community engagement? Maybe you're not. I mean, that's a valid, very valid kind of discussion to have. Are we even ready as an organization to engage our community? Do we need to do some work internally first before we even can go out and do that? And then from this guide, we have also produced a separate guide on diversity and inclusion and how to foster diversity and inclusion within organizations and programs. So it's a continuing series of documents. And that's just one of the ways we do in community engagement. So we also have, as a convener, we do a lot of different things, such as our conference that we do annually, that we try to make sure that we really center our conference where we are when we're in person. So we were in Tucson, Arizona this past year. And so we made sure that we invited the mayor of Tucson to come and kind of introduce herself and her city to us, and brought in musicians and featured the food of the area, and all kinds of different ways that we make sure that we're rooted in community when we're somewhere. We also do a lot of work through our EE360, which is our collaborative agreement with US EPA around reaching frontline communities through working with HBCUs, working with tribal colleges, and making sure that our partners in this program also are doing work to reach those communities as well. We're kind of in that unique place where we're a backbone organization and not a direct program provider. So a lot about all those kind of backbone things, capacity building, advocacy. So one thing we really do well, I think, is when we are doing, every year we do appropriations outreach for US EPA and NOAA to make sure that the money is getting allocated for environmental education regional grants, the big EPA collaborative agreement grants, all of the BWET, watershed education training grants through NOAA, and kind of activating our grassroots network to get sign-on letters from organizations, encourage folks to reach out to their senators and to their House of Representative members to get engaged. So a lot of the work we do is at that national kind of level. So those are just a few of the things out there.
Thank you, Bruce. And yeah, big applause to NAAEE. You say that you're a backbone, but we are your community, right? Like the community that you're working with right now and that you're on with, we are your community. And both James and I use the guidelines for community engagement excellence in courses that we teach either together or separately. And they've just been an extraordinary resource for our community. So if for some reason you are not familiar with them on this webinar, we encourage you for your next step, as soon as you get off here, to go and download those and take a look at them. They're just, they're phenomenal. So we're coming up to about 15 minutes before our time together is over. And I, of course, have so many questions for our panelists, but I want to make sure that we are getting questions from the folks who are listening right now. And there are not a lot of us on this call. And so I would encourage you, if you have any questions, to just turn on your camera and ask a question. And if you're shy, or if you're eating lunch or breakfast, or don't want your camera on, you're welcome to also just drop it in the chat. But I will pause right here just to see if there are any questions.
Hi, I've got a question that I'm still formulating, so apologies if I stumble a little bit, but when engaging communities, I mean, it's easy to engage people that share your beliefs and share your insights and want to, you know, reduce their carbon footprint and help, you know, reduce plastic consumption and all those things that will help help the earth. How do you, and especially now that everything is just so politicized, what are some ways that you can kind of get past that and engage people that might not otherwise engage with you or your organization?
I know something
leave
that
that.
always
Oh, go ahead, Bruce. Yep.
works for me is like kind of talking and reaching a place of empathy with each other and like kind of understanding each other. And once you can build that like camaraderie of empathy, it's a lot easier to cut through the BS that's out there in the echo chambers. Until you kind of can see each other as people and individuals, it's hard to do any kind of collaborate. And I'm not the best person at it because I really hold firm to my beliefs and my values, but I have seen it work.
Yeah, I agree, Bruce. You know, I think the way that you make those intransigent communities, previously intransigent communities, collaborators, is by identifying commonality, right? So we work in our conservation projects here. We're reintroducing a species back into California that hasn't been here for 80 years. And some of the project partner teams are not traditionally viewed as conservationists by people in conservation. So we're working with hunters, we're working with Marines, we're working with the bombing range nearby. And they're some of our best allies, the hunters especially. Safari Club International, which is viewed by many people as antithetical to conservation. They're big supporters of trophy hunting, but they love the animals. They love the ecosystem. The Marines and the bombing range need open, safe spaces in which they can do their activities. They have to know how to do these things. This is a national priority. You may not agree with those priorities, but it is a priority. It's an action that needs to be done, at least perceived as such. And you find the commonality points. You know, they may be divergent from where you are and what your real goals are, but if you can be, I don't want to say flexible, but morally flexible, but if you can view what you're doing more broadly than the constrained views that I have to view how I do conservation or have done it in the past, you know, putting up fences around areas and kicking everybody out, which is a pathetic way to do conservation in my perspective, but how we've done it. If you can move past the boundaries of your thought, other people will as well. Sort of what Bruce was alluding to there. People come to you if you go to them.
One thing I'll add to that too is I found we've done a lot of work and education around really political topics like evolution and vaccines, et cetera. And one thing I found is that people don't often understand those problems. They just hear what is being told to them. So like we've taught about evolution, and if you go around the word evolution and use the word adaptation, people will totally agree with you. If you say evolution, they'll panic and be like, no, I don't believe in that. But if you talk about adaptation, they're like, yeah, absolutely, things adapt to the environments. Which is, I mean, you don't want to avoid the topic entirely, but it's one way we've been able to still work with people that are a little bit more on the fence.
Great, thank you all. Brianne, did you have something you wanted to add to that one?
Oh, well, okay. So in my personal life, I do a lot of dog training. And there's this concept called chunking and lumping, right? And chunking is like, we're going to put all the things together and just like see what happens. And then, you know, or lumping, sorry. And then chunking is like breaking everything out. And I think sort of as a group, we tend to be a lot of lumpers. We put everything together and say, look at this package. Isn't it great? Don't you want to do it? Isn't it perfect? Without sort of saying, okay, but actually this person I'm talking with is starting here, and getting from here to here in one conversation is not going to happen. So where are the pieces on that path that you can break it down, and the connection points, right? And James, you were talking about a lot about this with like, we engage a lot with principals who obviously care deeply about their students, right? Like this is the connection point. We also do. And what we have to figure out is how do we communicate how the work that we're providing is achieving some of the goals that they want to achieve. But we can't just say, but look, here's this pretty research that somebody said, right? We need to break it down. We need to share stories, and we need to focus on the pieces that they really care about. And so I just like that chunking and lumping idea, right? Like, how can you really break things down so that even if you don't get to hear, you get to hear. And then from there, you find more connection points that might allow you to connect more.
Thank you, Brianne. And yeah, it's that those bridging of ideas, right? Those sort of how do you build a bridge from point A to point B, I think is a really valuable concept. Danny, I saw that your hand was up and then I saw that you turned off your camera. So I hope that you didn't go away because I wanted to get to you next.
No, I didn't go away, but I just feel like, yeah, I don't want to be the focus. So, and I have bad face mannerisms, I'm told. So I kind of take it off. But anyway, I was, James I know, hi, James. He's going to like, yeah, that's Danny for you. But he kind of answered some of my question in that I was looking for those relationships, especially when, you know, AZA accredited facilities, people want to know what you're doing in your own backyard and those challenges that you have with those people. And I think James kind of hit it all on the head, but I was looking for those other circumstances where maybe you were contacted by someone that you were like surprised that they reached out to you to do a collaboration, because, and James hit it on the head too with, you know, like Ducks Unlimited, people don't think of them as a possible partner, but they're huge when it comes to conservation. They just had a story on CBS Sunday Morning about a hunter who is huge about conservation. I mean, hunters and those other organizations that we don't necessarily think of can be great partners when it comes to saving our own backyard species and those places that are disappearing right here in our own backyard. So I kind of went a little too far, but anybody have any examples of somebody they were surprised about collaborating with?
I think my whole life is surprise. Like everything is like, really? Okay, let's go that way. Sure.
You and me both,
yeah,
my friend. You and me both.
Right. I think it's probably the case for many of us. You know, we're as public agencies, I think we're quite often approached by people who we are not always expecting to come or being receptive to our messaging. Because I think we view ourselves in a way that our communities don't necessarily, you know, we view ourselves as like lunatic lefty fringe. We're out here doing craziness, right? And our communities view us as a stable, sane, well-respected public resource that does good things for everyone. You know, with the exception of libraries. Libraries are bad for everybody, I think. Not right, Caitlin. But every collaboration is a bit of a surprise to me in a lot of ways. You know, there's always something interesting that comes out of a new relationship with a collaborator, and it's great. You know, I love being challenged. I love novel people who come at a question in a very different way than I do. You know, it makes things richer and it makes the experience better, and like we've been talking about, it makes it more relevant to the local community, so that the local community will buy into it, they'll support it, they want to lead it, they want to take it on. So surprise is good. And like you just said, Danny, exactly, stay curious and ask questions. Caitlin, I don't know if you want to defend libraries or Bruce.
No, I agree with you. Just kidding.
I was just going to say an interesting partner that came to us at NAAE was Pratt & Whitney approached us about running their eSTEM Environmental Education Youth Awards program. And it has become this it's been a lot of work on our end, not in my portfolio, thankfully, but it has become a really fruitful partnership between this corporation that does a lot of aircraft building and that kind of thing to really focus on getting awards out to youth groups that are focused on environmental STEM. And I think if I remember correctly, we were able to offer grants totaling $250,000 to 12 nonprofits in 10 countries through that program, which had they not approached us about that, we would never be able to do that. So sometimes those corporate groups that, you know, we may rail against, like, oh, they're doing so many things to our environment. A lot of times they're also the ones investing millions of dollars into programs that help support conservation and environmental education.
Muted again. Bruce, I was just saying to myself that, you know, I think that really speaks to sort of what James was saying, which is this idea of broadening our sort of, we don't have to compromise our morals, but broadening the way in which we look at what partnerships can be and what working with communities can be is really valuable, and that we have to stay away from dogma, right? That we have to just broaden our approach and be open to any and all possibilities. And, you know, I think that makes us, to your point too, Bruce, a more empathetic and caring society at whole if we come to it from a place of wanting to make the best possible world that we can for everyone, for both ourselves and for those with whom we completely align and those who we have to find where we do align, where it's a little bit harder, but we still can find those commonalities. So we're coming up to just the very last few minutes here. If anybody does have additional questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. But I'd like to ask my last question of each of our panelists, which is, this has been such a great and hope-giving conversation, that what brings you the most hope for the planet in the work that you're doing with the community? So I will start with Brianne on this one.
Well, we just had the opportunity to go through the Washington Youth Garden's 50th anniversary just this past year. And the Washington Youth Garden was a part of a youth garden movement in DC in the 1970s. And they were sort of set up all over the district, but of those that even still remain as gardens, there's 4 that still remain as gardens, and ours is the only that remains as a youth garden. But what I think I find hopeful about this is that this work goes in cycles, right? So it had been the youth garden movement, and now it is the school garden movement, and they come from how can we, you know, engage with young people in the natural world, in the environment that they are already connected to. How can we teach the skills and the love of nature and of food and of these things that they need to understand, you know, for the rest of their life at a young age, at a meaningful, experiential way. And I think that there's just something about that idea that, like, the work that started in the 1970s continues through us, and while we might do different programs, that impact continues to ripple out, and we hear the stories of, you know, parents of kindergartners on field trips who participated in this program when they were kids, and they come back out. And I just think, you know, I haven't always been able to be in an organization that had that sort of history, and it's just a really special moment to remember. You don't always know the impact of the work that you're doing, but that doesn't mean it's not valuable and important.
That was awesome. Thank you, Brianne. James, I'll go to you next. What brings you hope in your community-driven work?
Everything. You know, I feel I getting to hear this great work that Bruce, Caitlin, and Brianne are all have been talking about with Danny. Just what everybody's sharing. You know, we tend to, if you read the paper, right? I subscribe to the New York Times, so I get it weekdays, and you know, you pick it up and you look at it, and you're just like, everything sucks. It's all terrible, right? But then when you talk to the people in our field, you realize all these things are happening in so many different settings and so many different locations and priorities. It's that what gives me hope is us. You know, we're the change. We're the change we want to see. So that's what makes me happy and hopeful, is getting to hear work from people at other organizations who, you know, are doing good things, but you don't know it until you talk to them, the specifics. And I guess you all are that. So you all give me hope.
Oh, thanks, James. Bruce, how about you? What gives you hope?
What gives me hope right now is this important and new, or I don't want to say new, but this important attention to culturally relevant environmental education, and how we're not just kind of teaching what has always been taught, but are really approaching it from ways that are important to our communities, approaching it from ways that take into consideration things like trauma and I can't ever get the acronym SES, just taking into those kind of different considerations, and we're not just kind of doing a whitewashed version of EE, that it's really focused in caring community. And that brings me hope, and how much attention has been paid to shifting towards anti-racist movements and anti-oppressive programs. I think is just the future, and it's the only way the field is going to stay relevant.
That could be an entire week-long workshop in and of itself. So thank you for bringing that up. And I'm sorry we didn't get a chance to really dive into that more deeply today. Finally, Caitlin, since we're just a few minutes over, I want to make sure that you have an opportunity to share what brings you hope as well.
Thank you. I mean, I couldn't agree more with what the other panelists just shared, but yeah, I think good lasting change and solutions happen slowly. So if you pay careful attention to those things, it's hard not to be hopeful.
Great. Well, this was what a great way to end this. Thank you to all four of you for those beautiful insights. And thank you to everybody who had an opportunity to stay a few minutes past. We will be sending out the link so that you can share this with folks who couldn't join, or if you'd like to watch it again. I think, you know, what I heard from today is that really that long-term investment in our communities is what leads to change, and that developing those authentic partnerships with trust and empathy and identifying commonalities and really bringing relevancy to our local communities is what is going to create these amazing community partnerships that will save the world and save the world together. So thank you again for everybody and your time. We so appreciate it. We hope to see you at a Canopy Strategic Partners webinar sometime soon. Thanks again, everyone. Take care.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Elise. Great job.
Thank you.
Thanks, Elise.
Thanks, Brianne. Thanks, Bruce.
Yeah.
See y'all. Nice to meet you.